Pointer going. Howdy, y'all. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Y'all know the drill by now. Just came off the pot, too. This is, woo, pretty hot. Hmm. Let me let that cool down. Well, anyways, howdy, y'all. Welcome to History by Phillips. I'm Mr. Phillips, and this is the last video of this lecture series of the Jackson era. In the first episode, we talked about Jacksonian democracy. How more citizens of the United States are able to vote now. You don't have this requirement to own property in most states. You don't have this requirement to pay a poll tax when you go vote in most states now. Now, keep in mind when I say democracy has been expanded to the United States, and pretty much, I am referring to only white males. Women still can't vote. Most African Americans can't vote. There are some exceptions. There are some freed African Americans. But a little side note with the Tennessee state constitution, when they wrote their constitution for the state, they wrote it in a way where only white men can vote. So even free men in Tennessee at the time could not vote. Freed African Americans anyway. But yeah, if African Americans can't vote, some Indians can't vote, women can't vote. But I digress. But either way, it's a start. We're starting to expand the electorate. We're starting to become more democratic in our democratic republic. Remember, our country is still a republic. We rule through representatives. Remember, it doesn't make sense that everybody in the United States go to Washington D.C. We still have representatives, but more people are getting the chance to vote, and those people made their voices heard, and they chose Andrew Jackson. In the second video in this lecture series, we talked about conflicts over land, mostly with the Native Americans. We focused on the five civilized tribes. Civility is subjective. They were considered civilized because they pretty much acted and functioned in the same way as these European settlers did, these white folk. Uh, Yesterday in class, a lot of students were surprised by Chief John Ross. I guess you was expecting some headdress and all that kind of stuff with John Ross, but no, they worked and functioned just like white folk did. They had their own laws, constitutions, you name it. But the five tribes we talked about was Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminoles. Which one I forget? Forgot one. Creeks and the Creeks, and talked about them. We talked about how the Seminoles were the only ones to successfully resist. It'd take them about 3 decades to relocate the Seminoles from Florida. I digress. Most Indians that got sent on the Trail of Tears, and mostly Cherokee in nature, but the Indians got relocated in Oklahoma, considered a wasteland to a lot of these European settlers. Uh, the farming wasn't as good, the hunting wasn't as good, just the land wasn't as good. Plus, keep in mind you already have other Native American tribes living there, like the Kiowas, the Osages, I think some of the Comanches and Apaches, all out in that area. They're not going to get along, so the U.S. Army had to build a bunch of posts. A lot of these posts take Indian names like Fort Kiowa, Fort Apache, things of that sort. But you start seeing this developing, scattering out throughout the West. This will kind of be a precursor to the Indian Wars that take place after the Civil War. But I digress. Well, Indian Wars will last for a while, but a lot of it take bulk after the Civil War. Civil War kind of takes precedence. I digress. In this lesson, we'll be talking about Andrew Jackson and his war against the bank. Now, if you remember back in Thomas Jefferson's days, you had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists believed in a loose interpretation of the Constitution, so they believed the Constitution allowed them to establish a bank because it makes sense that we need to put the government funds somewhere. While Thomas Jefferson and Democratic Republicans, they believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. So if the Constitution doesn't say it, you can't do it. Well, Jackson's going to be cut of that cloth. He's going to be more of a strict constitutionalist. If the Constitution doesn't say it, you can't do it. But that's one gripe Jackson has about it. The other gripe he has is it's just controlled by the rich, for the rich. It keeps the poor man poor. But we'll get into today's lesson. There's two things that we'll be looking at today: Jackson's war against the bank and the Whigs rising to power. Whigs will be a new political party. The best way to think of the Whigs is they are Republican and national Republican in nature, not the Republicans you know of today, like Donald Trump's party. That's a different kind of Republicanism. The Republicanism that we recognize won't come about till Abraham Lincoln. But these national republics, they lose an election, so they kind of reform. They came up with Whigs. Now, these Whigs are Republicans, National Republicans who couldn't get along with the National Republican Party, some disenfranchised Democrats that don't like Jackson and his leanings. Best way to think of the Whig Party is people who just don't like Jackson. They don't really have one thing they're railing behind. The only thing they all can really agree on is they don't like how Jackson's doing things in the Oval Office in the White House. But I digress. But yes, Jackson's going to wage war against the bank. Some folks are going to love this, but in reality, it's going to cause the country to go into a depression. Something that we like to talk, us historians call the Panic of 1837. You need to write that down. We'll be talking about that here in a moment. But I digress. I need to quit saying I use that word a lot. No, I digress. With that being said, let's get started. Let me get some coffee here. Maybe it's cooled down a little bit. Oh yeah, we'll be talking about William Henry Harrison, shortest reigning president. We'll talk about him. It's kind of fun to talk about him. I digress. Let's go. So Jackson's war against the bank. So the National Bank, it's been established since 1816. Now remember, there was a big hoopla about it with Jefferson and Adams and Hamilton and all those guys. Well, we figured out that the National Bank is a good thing to have because you don't have to rely on taxes in case you need to go to war. It's good to have an emergency pile of money somewhere in case national disasters happen, just things fall apart and break. If you need to pay somebody or go to war, just emergency funds. Well, Henry Clay, if you remember, Henry Clay's from Kentucky. He's one of these favorite sons representing the West. Uh, he doesn't like Jackson. Remember the corrupt bargain of 1824. He convinced the House of Representatives to vote for John Quincy Adams instead of Andrew Jackson, even though Andrew Jackson had more votes. So Clay's going to run against him. Uh, but he asked the National Bank's president, Nicholas Biddle, he's pretty much the person running the bank at the time, to apply for renewal for the bank. Because remember, the bank's kind of like the president; it's up, it stays up for so many years, then it has to reapply to get renewed. Well, they're trying to push this renewal process during Andrew Jackson's time because they're hoping Andrew Jackson will see this bill presented to him and he will veto it. And when Jackson vetoes it, Henry Clay thinks that the United States public, the people that are voting, are not going to like this action. They're like, we need a national bank. What are you doing, Andrew Jackson? So he's hoping if Andrew Jackson vetoes this, the United States populace would not support Andrew Jackson and hence vote for Henry Clay in the 1832 election. Well, so Clay and Biddle get together and they work on this plan. Biddle sends up a renewal for the National Bank. Andrew Jackson sees it. Andrew Jackson is in bed at the time when he sees this. He's very sick. He makes a saying. What was his quote? This the bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it. So he vetoes it. He goes to the White House. He starts putting out legislation. Not only does he veto it, he empties out the deposits, puts them in state banks, so on and so forth. But we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, Henry Clay's hoping that Jackson would veto the bank. Uh, he'd lose support through the Americans here during the 1832 election. And so Henry Clay would become president, but that does not happen. What happened is America loves that Jackson vetoed this because a lot of folks view the bank as it's only for the rich. It's only going to help out the rich, keeps poor man poor. It's not like I can go in and get a bank loan, but you can give these bank loans to your rich New England buddies, so on and so forth. That's what a lot of people viewed it. So Jackson wins in a landslide, as you can tell. Uh, People loved this. So Jackson vetoes the bank. Uh, He kills it. Like I said, he takes all the deposits in the national bank and he starts putting them in various state banks. Now, the issue with that is some of these state banks, they have different operating procedures, I could say. Some banks are loaning money out egregiously, not being able to take it back. Some are not loaning out enough. Long story short is these state banks are being irresponsible with the money. This is going to cause a financial trouble here in about 3 or 4 years. Remember, Jackson starts taking all the deposits out in like 1832, 1833. Well, a depression is going to hit in 1837, and his successor is going to have to be the one to deal with it. He doesn't cause the problem, but he's going to get blamed for it. But all these state banks are being irresponsible with this money. Inflation is going to go up. The country's going to go into a depression, a really severe depression. Uh, but the Whigs, this new political party, like I said earlier, they're opposed to Andrew Jackson. This is made up of like national Republicans, Democrats that don't like Jackson, just folks that are anti-Jackson or Whigs. They're not really they don't have the same political ideology, but they agree on Jackson's not good. So they see their chance. They're going to try to end the Democratic rule because remember, this is Jackson's second presidential term. Uh, so his vice president, Martin Van Buren, is going to take his place, or try to anyway, in the 1836 election. Uh, but the Whigs, they're going to be kind of sneaky about it. Remember in the 1824 election, we had so many uh, candidates. Jackson ended up winning. He had the most votes, as you can tell here, but he did not have a majority. Well, the Whigs are going to try to do the same thing in the 1836 election. They're going to run three candidates against Martin Van Buren, Andrew Jackson's vice president, because remember, Jackson served 2 terms. He's not going to go for three. Remember, George Washington set those precedents, if you remember back in like chapter 2 or 3. Uh, so you got Martin Van Buren, the sole Democrat running. Then you got three Whigs running. What the Whigs are hoping for, because at this time the Whigs control the House of Representatives, they pretty much control Congress. They're hoping that a situation like this will happen again, where Martin Van Buren might get most of the votes, but he will not have a majority, a 50% right here. So they're hoping this will go into the House of Representatives, and from there they can elect one of their Whig candidates, namely Clay, to become president. So let's see what happens. That does not work at all. Andrew Jackson is just so popular that his word for like, hey, Martin Van Buren's my boy. He served with me, my vice president. He's better than John C. Calhoun, my first vice president. This dude's the man. Uh, so that's all he really needed. He got the support just because of Andrew Jackson. Uh, he went. He got 58% of the electoral vote, 51% of the popular vote. Martin Van Buren wins. But you can see here, you got a Whig candidate, William Henry Harrison, the White, then Webster. Uh, but their plan didn't work. He's hoping that he wouldn't get 50% and it would go to the House of Representatives, but that did not happen. But because where Andrew Jackson killed Makoff earlier, by the time he steps into office in 1837, the country's in the bad depression, really bad depression. We call this time the Panic of 1837. Uh, like I said, where Jackson took all the deposits out of the national bank and put them in various state banks. They was just irresponsible with them, lost the money. Some people just didn't see the money worth anything. They wouldn't use it. They was like, well, this ain't worth nothing. Why should I use it? They didn't care about it. It started losing its faith value. But I digress. But a lot of what you need to keep in mind is everybody's in a depression, and it's known as the Panic of 1837. And I know you might be new to politics, but hopefully you sort of got interested into it this year with this recent election. Uh, but historically, it's hard for a political party to remain in power after a depression. It's really hard. Not saying it's impossible. It's really hard. So a lot of folks are going to blame Martin Van Buren for this depression, which is which is false. They should be blaming Jackson for this, where he's the one who killed the bank. But they're going to blame Martin Van Buren. That's just how society works. They're going to blame Martin Van Buren. So once again, the Whigs have a chance to beat them. So the Whigs, they're going to run. They're going to run against him in the 1840 election because this panic of 18. Everybody's poor. They don't like it. Uh, William Henry Harrison wins by a landslide. Like I said, poor people get mad and they'll vote. They voice their opinion here. This is, I think, the biggest turnout in a while. They was just tired of the Democrat rule. They loved Jackson, but the last 4 years with Martin Van Buren, uh, people just do not like being in depression, not having money. Uh, so the Whigs, they would run William Henry Harrison, this man right here. He's also a war hero. He didn't make a name in the War of 1812. Uh, he's the one who fought Tecumseh and the Prophet up in the Great Lakes area in Indiana. This dude said he's a rich man from Ohio, William Henry Harrison. They would portray him as a frontiersman like Jackson, kind of like how Jackson rode that common man fame to the White House. Well, the Whigs are going to try to do the same thing. Let me point this way. The Whigs are going to try to do the same thing with this guy right here. But in reality, he's a rich boy from Ohio, but they're going to portray him as just a frontiersman, fought in the war, just a simple man like everybody else. And it works. This will be known as the Log Cabin Campaign. There's always a TCAP question about the Log Cabin Campaign. Just know William Henry Harrison, Log Cabin Campaign. But for his vice president, he would choose he's not on paper, it says he's a Whig, but he's actually a Democrat. He chooses John Tyler as his vice president, so he would be able to gain support of these southern states here, because John Tyler's from Virginia. Hoping having him as his ballot, some Democrats will feel more comfortable voting for him, and it worked. So let's see what the Whigs do while they're in power. Well, not that much. William Henry Harrison, he did three things as president. He got elected, he gave a speech, and he died. Uh, Simple as that. That's all he really did. William Henry Harrison gets elected, 1840, and so he takes office in 1841. On his inauguration day, you know how Jackson had a hoot nanny, woo, a rager. You know what I'm saying? Uh, William Henry Harrison, he's out there giving a speech. This speech, I think it was about 4 hours, but the weather was cold. Now, I see some students around here doing this all the time. You'll be outside there in recess, and it might be like 30 degrees outside, and they won't have a jacket on or be in gym shorts or something. You know how it goes. Like, hey, are you cold? About, no, I'm not cold. Well, William Henry Harrison, he was trying to portray a tough guy, I guess. He didn't wear a hat during this cold weather. Remember, this is like January, or it's in the winter, I think January. It was kind of raining, just really cold. He didn't wear a hat, he didn't wear a jacket. Uh, well, the fool, he ended up developing pneumonia, and he would die 32 days later in office. So the Whigs, they finally construct a plan to get somebody elected. They get their guy elected. This war hero, everybody seems to like this guy. He's up there giving his speech for about 4 hours in the cold and the rain, develops pneumonia and dies. First time a president has died while serving. Uh, so what happens? The vice president takes over. In this case, it's going to be John Tyler. Now, John Tyler, he becomes president. I think he becomes president at 50 years old, making him the youngest president so far. Uh, However, John Tyler did not like Whig policies. Uh, he just didn't. So anytime the Whigs passed some legislation through Congress or something, John Tyler would veto it. He just kept vetoing stuff. It got so bad that the Whigs would end up kicking him out of the party. It's so bad. Uh, One thing John Tyler did do during his presidency was he helped iron out the Canadian border. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. But this side of the border, he's more along toward the Maine and Great Lakes side of the United States. He helped iron that out. Once again, you need to know that the United States Canadian border is the longest unprotected border in the world. That's neither here or there. But yes, basically, you have Andrew Jackson. Uh, Call him a populist if you want. Father of the Democratic Party. Rises in power. Orphan boy did good. Uh, Becomes a war hero. Becomes president. He's so anti-establishment, I guess you can say rich folk if you want to look at it in a class perspective, that he's tired of the elites in Washington D.C. He got rid of the bureaucrats in the spoil system. After you're not helping America, you're just here to mooch off the system, getting rid of you. Also with the bank, he viewed the bank as the same way, especially Nicholas Biddle. Nicholas Biddle represented everything that he didn't like. He's like, you know what, you're just working for the rich. You don't really care about the United States average citizen. You're just here to help you and your buddies out. So he kills the bank. Everybody loves this at the time. A lot of folks agree with Jackson. The bank's just helping the rich out. Well, it takes about 3 or 4 years without the bank there. People realizing, like, oh crap, we really do need a national bank. Jackson don't really get the blame for this at the time, though. This blame will fall onto his successor, Martin Van Buren. Jackson served 2 terms as a Democrat president. For the most part, folks liked it. But then folks start turning sour toward the Democrats during Martin Van Buren's time. That's due partly in large because of the Panic of 1837, because of Andrew Jackson, where he killed the bank. The state banks were irresponsible with money. Then you start having a bad depression in the year 1837, known as the Panic of 1837. Uh, People are going to blame Martin Van Buren, and since he's a Democrat, they're going to start blaming Democrats. So the Whigs, they see their chance to finally beat the Democrats after 12 years of Democratic rule. Remember Jackson's 8 years as a president, then Van Buren's 4 years. They finally win an election with William Henry Harrison. Uh, like, yes, finally got control. We can start implement policies that we like. Well, smart man here. Nope, that smart man. Yeah, that one. Well, he gives a speech on Inauguration Day without hat and jacket, very cold, very rainy. Develops pneumonia and dies. That means John Tyler will become president. Uh, in 1841, and yeah, he was a Whig in disguise. That's kind of funny to think about. Whig in disguise. He wasn't really a Whig. He just ran with William Henry Harrison because William Henry Harrison needed the support of the Southern population. The Southerners typically liked John Tyler. But when John Tyler was president, he did not support the Whigs. Anything they did in Congress, he vetoed it. So they ended up kicking him out of the Whig Party. And that will bring us to the end of today's lesson. We've talked about Old Hickory. I love Old Hickory. It's one of my favorite parts of the United States history. I wish we can go into them a little bit more, but I got to stick with these standards that I'm given to talk. Next week, we'll be talking about Manifest Destiny. I think Davy Crockett and Alamo will be making an appearance. We'll be talking about Texas, the greatest colony Tennessee's ever founded. Yeah, take that, Texas. Yeehaw. I don't know if you've ever met a cowboy from Texas, but they're annoying. No, they're not. They're good folk. They love Texas about as much as we love Tennessee here. Keep that in mind, Texas. You be Mexico without us. But anyway, we'll be talking about the Alamo. We'll be talking about Manifest Destiny. We'll be talking about James Polk, young Hickory. A lot of folks viewed him as the younger version of Andrew Jackson, who'll be becoming president. And we'll be viewing sectional differences, especially between the North and South. It's just going to come to a head. Hopefully, you know by now by the Civil War. That's all I've got for y'all today. This has been History by Phillips. I've been Mr. Phillips. Make sure you come to Study Block today at 1:30. I will have a review video up tomorrow over the Jackson era. But until next time, take care, stay safe, peace.